Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Elizabeth Johnson. Elizabeth Johnson was 23 years old, and her husband was 25. They lived in Tempe, Arizona, USA. Although on the surface they appear to be a happy couple, their reality is much different. Elizabeth's life has been through many hardships, which have negatively impacted her relationships. Her parents were addicted to illegal substances and barely cared for her, forcing her to grow up in poverty. Fortunately, her time in this dreadful environment was short-lived. Her mother passed away when she was still young, drowning after losing consciousness from an overdose of illegal drugs. At that time, her father was also in a state of madness and could not help her. A few years later, her father died from liver disease, which was also linked to his addictions. After these incidents, Elizabeth was sent to an orphanage. Several families adopted her, but then they returned her to the orphanage. These childhood damage caused Elizabeth much suffering. She had behavioral problems and was often labeled a problem child. Now she's faced with adult problems that she doesn't know how to handle. Those who knew her well said she was immature for her age, and she lived in constant fear of abandonment. This fear made her intensely jealous of her boyfriend, Logan. Elizabeth had difficulty controlling her emotions, leading to severe psychological stress. This often resulted in conflicts with her lover, Logan. During these conflicts, she frequently lost control and sometimes physically attacked him. Her immaturity made her unable to understand her own actions. Despite this, Logan loved her, and they got married after dating for a few months. He hopes that marriage will help she change. Unfortunately, her fear grew and her tantrums became very disturbing. For example, during a picnic, they had a fight, and Logan narrowly avoided falling into the fire. He only suffered minor burns. However, when she wasn't aggressive, they seemed like a great couple. Treat each other well and have the ability to become an ideal family. Logan was already suspicious of Elizabeth's change, but he continued to hope for the best. Sometime after the marriage, they discover that Elizabeth is pregnant, which was a big surprise for them. They feel unprepared to become parents. Initially, they had planned to establish themselves before having children, so Elizabeth decided she did not want to become a mother. However, she later changed her mind and chose to continue with the pregnancy. Their son, Gabriel, was born on May 3, 2009. Unfortunately, this did nothing to make Elizabeth more mature. She still behaved like a child. According to those around her, her anger outbursts became unpredictable. During these times, she would latch on to minor issues to provoke conflicts. Gabriel is quite difficult, and she has to try very hard to control him. The boy always wanted to be comforted, and whenever Elizabeth left him alone, he would start crying. His cries irritated her, causing her to lose her temper and yell. It was a chaotic situation, and Logan trying to stay calm for the sake of the child. During that period, Logan worked hard to support his young family, which often kept him away from home. At home, he always tries to help his wife and take care of the children. He wanted to be close to his son, but Elizabeth's temperament made things difficult. Not only was she as volatile as before, but baby's constant crying and irritability made her ready to lash out at Logan over minor issues. Her jealousy increased. She becomes more suspicious of Logan's interactions with other women. Her fear of being abandoned turned into panic, haunting her. Everything is getting worse and worse. Elizabeth accused Logan of loving their son, Gabriel, too much. She even grew jealous of the child, convinced that Logan loved her less since his birth. During her angry outbursts, her behavior became more extreme. She started smashing things, including household appliances and dishes. On one occasion, she even took a kitchen knife and cut up the sofa and her son's bed. Logan finds it very difficult living in such an environment. During these episodes, he feared for his life and the safety of the son. He wanted to be close to his child, but he didn't want to continue to endure Elizabeth's anger. Finally, he ran out of patience, especially when Elizabeth didn't change. After a few months of living like this, Logan announced that he wanted a divorce and moved out with his son, Gabriel. Elizabeth's childhood fears and traumas return, but she never takes responsibility for what happened. Instead, she blamed her husband, Logan, calling him narrow-minded. Worst of all, she began to threaten to give Gabriel up for adoption. Logan assured her that he could take care of the baby himself, making such an action unnecessary. Unfortunately, Elizabeth saw this as a new way to manipulate the situation and frequently used this threat against Logan. When Logan consulted a lawyer, he learned that by law, Elizabeth could not arbitrarily let someone else adopt their son, Gabriel. If the child's biological father disagreed, they would need to settle custody arrangements in court. Elizabeth could have given full custody to he, but she didn't want to. She just wanted to control him longer and get revenge. Eventually, they divorced, and they were granted joint custody. However, her erratic behavior made he feel it was unsafe for their son, Gabriel, to stay with her, so he sought full custody. This process took time. Meanwhile, the boy lived with his father, and his mother visited him according to their agreement. Over time, Elizabeth seemed to become less anxious and calmer. What happened at Elizabeth's house when Logan wasn't there was unclear. The situation might have been worsening. As Christmas approached, Logan planned to spend the holiday with his family. He had a grand vacation in mind. They would meet Santa Claus and give Gabriel his first Christmas presents. But this plan was not to be. On December 18, 2009, Logan was supposed to pick up Gabriel from Elizabeth's house around 4 p.m. However, when he arrived, no one opened the door and the car was not in the driveway. This was strange, because they had planned that he would visit and he will take Gabriel away. Then, he continued to knock. By this point, they had a well-established custody arrangement for the child. Everyone was accustomed to it, so Elizabeth's actions seemed unusual. She couldn't just take Gabriel and go wherever she pleased. Logan looked through the bedroom window and saw furniture boxes scattered and emptied on the floor. He thinks she's gone crazy again. She must have packed her things and taken Gabriel away to an unknown location, so he became very worried and immediately contacted the police. Unfortunately, by law, nothing could be done because Elizabeth was Gabriel's biological mother. She was the child's legal guardian. The authorities ignored Logan's worries. Although this made him feel discomfort, he was forced to go home. For the following days, nobody managed to reach Elizabeth. She remained silent. No one understood what had happened, making the situation more complicated. Only Logan and his family were interested in the search. The police ignored his warnings that Elizabeth could be a danger to Gabriel. He had no choice but to do everything to contact she. Unexpectedly, on December 27th, he received a message from an unknown number, but it was clear it was from Elizabeth. She wrote that he would never find his beloved son, Gabriel. She was leaving the country, and when she arrived, she would send him the exact address where he could find Gabriel's body. She also added that, earlier, she had strangled her son, Gabriel. After hearing these words, Logan could barely stand, but he immediately called the unknown number. At first, Elizabeth ignored those calls, but finally answered on the 6th attempt. Logan insisted that she was lying and that Gabriel was fine. However, Elizabeth claimed to have strangled the baby and put it in a trash bag with diapers and then threw it into a dumpster. She said it was revenge for his countless betrayals. After this, Logan contacted the police, but to his surprise, he was again told that they could do nothing. The police did not take what Elizabeth said seriously. The next day, the police got involved because Elizabeth will have to attend the final trial for custody of Gabriel, but she did not appear in court as expected. So they started looking for her. They quickly determined she had gone to San Antonio, Texas. Shortly after moving there, she sought employment and attended a nightclub casting to become a dancer. Other dancers remembered her well and identified her from photographs. She was seen attending the casting alone, without Gabriel. However, after that, she did not appear. From the first time we met, everyone realized that she had a very bad personality. Detectives found that Elizabeth had tried to get jobs at 2 nightclubs at the same time. However, then, her actions became puzzling, because she didn't start working at either place. Investigators tried to determine the last time she was with Gabriel before she called Logan to report the murder. From trip records, they learned that on December 27th, she bought a bus ticket traveling between states. Gabriel did not accompany her on this trip from San Antonio to Florida. The investigation brought them to Miami on December 29th, where Elizabeth was arrested at a motel. Investigators questioned her about Gabriel's whereabouts and interrogated her about messages and a call to Logan. She denied the accusations, claiming she only wanted to annoy and get back at he. She mentioned she was heading to San Antonio to meet a couple interested in adoption. This was actually about illegally handing over a child to strangers. She claimed that she spent 3 days with they to ensure they were suitable and capable of caring for Gabriel. On the 3rd day, they met at a park. She gave Gabriel to they and left to begin a new life. She couldn't recall their names or contact details. But after some thought, she mentioned that the woman might be named Cheryl. It all sounds unreasonable, and the most confusing thing is that Elizabeth decided to leave Gabriel with a stranger, while Logan wanted to take care of the boy himself. Why is it necessary to separate the child from the father and find another family to raise the boy? That is illegal. Elizabeth had no answers to these questions. Law enforcement officers searched the San Antonio landfill using specially trained dogs, as there was a chance that the tip given to Logan was true. However, Gabriel's body was not found there. Then, authorities focused their attention on a family suspected of illegally adopting Gabriel. For Logan, this lead was his last hope of finding his son alive. Logan recalled a similar incident 6 months earlier. On that occasion, she went to the airport with Gabriel, seemingly planning to start a new life. Luckily, she didn't make it to the plane and was arrested by the police for trying to kidnap Gabriel. Elizabeth recounted that she cried a lot at the airport. And then, she met a 40-year-old woman named Tammy Smith. Seeing her hugging Gabriel and crying, Tammy decided to comfort her by expressing sympathy. She confided in Tammy that she felt incapable of being a good mother to her baby. Tammy then asked if she was considering giving her baby up for adoption. At first, she insisted that she wouldn't do it. Despite this, she and Tammy became friends after their encounter. They shared many similarities, particularly a difficult past. Tammy had worked as a dancer in a strip club and had been married to 2 men simultaneously at one point. She had a deep fear of being alone, which negatively impacted her life and relationships. She had been married 5 times and had 3 children with different men. All her children lived with their biological fathers, and she had lost parental rights. Unexpectedly, after 2001, changes occurred in Tammy's life. She decides that she really wants to raise her child and get her child back. There was no longer an opportunity to give birth again. So she turned to the services of the black market. During the investigation, it was established that Tammy adopted 2 children and was constantly looking for young mothers with problems so that she could adopt more children. She used social networks to persuade young women to give up their children and even approached pregnant women on the street, asking if they were planning to give up the child. After talking with Tammy, Elizabeth decided to give Gabriel up for adoption. Tammy became Gabriel's mother. When Logan learned of this, he immediately reported it to the police. Gabriel was taken from the Temmie home and returned to live with his father Logan. Temmie claimed that she did not know about the falsification of the adoption documents. Logan attempted to obtain custody to prevent Elizabeth from being able to see Gabriel again. However, the process dragged on for 6 months, which ultimately led to Gabriel's disappearance. After being arrested, Elizabeth launched a public relations campaign to support herself while awaiting trial. She frequently communicated with the media, gave interviews, and blamed Logan for the incident. She argues that if he agrees to let Temmie adopt Gabriel, none of this would have happened. Logan was shocked by her actions, which he perceived as driven by revenge. During the custody trial, he repeatedly sought sole custody, as he was the primary caregiver. Elizabeth wasn't interested in the boy and just wanted to get rid of him. Despite this, the court awarded joint custody. He tried to challenge this decision, but the court did not agree. After several months, Elizabeth faced multiple charges, including forging Logan's signature on adoption documents. However, the court considered this a minor crime, so it only imposed a 30-day prison sentence for signature forgery. During this time, the custody trial concluded. He was given full custody of Gabriel, but he still has no idea where the boy is. Investigators found no evidence of a crime, such as blood stains on the car, and did not find Gabriel's body. So they began to suspect that there might be a black market in child trafficking involved. This theory seemed plausible, since San Antonio is statistically a hub for black markets. Elizabeth had been in the city for some time, so it is likely that she had contact with organizations involved in child trafficking. During this time, she lived in a motel with her child, Gabriel, but later moved out without him. This is a common tactic used by these organizations, which often conduct exchanges in inexpensive motels to avoid drawing attention. Suspicion was heightened by the fact that Elizabeth had no relatives or acquaintances in San Antonio, suggesting her choice of location was deliberate. These factors all corroborate the initial story the detective shared after her arrest, suggesting that Gabriel may have been with strangers. The biggest challenge was keeping track of the child, which was almost impossible, as he was so young. There were several indirect signs. After arriving in San Antonio, Elizabeth posted on social media that if you want to do something, you will find a way to do it. In another post, she mentioned starting a new life. Later, she shared a photo showing 2 diamond rings. Logan knew she couldn't afford such expensive jewelry, valued at over $20,000. Elizabeth claimed they were gifts from admirers, but this seemed unlikely. This new information supports the theory that she sold Gabriel illegally, as payments for such transactions are not typically made in cash. During the investigation, the detectives contacted a young woman who had worked part-time as a nanny for Elizabeth when she first arrived in San Antonio with Gabriel. The girl was hired through an ad and looked after Gabriel for a day. She was shocked by how indifferent Elizabeth was to her son. Elizabeth didn't care if he was tired, needed sleep, or was hungry. The only thing Elizabeth requested was to give the boy medicine regularly to keep him quiet. Elizabeth simply wanted him to remain silent. The type of medication was unknown, but it was likely a sedative. Elizabeth spent 3 years in prison before her trial began. Initially, she was charged with kidnapping, but this charge was dropped. At that time, the law allowed a mother with joint custody to move across the country with her child, so it wasn't illegal. She was later charged with endangering Gabriel's life. The trial lasted 2 days, after which the jury found Elizabeth guilty. She was sentenced to 5 years and 3 months in prison. This decision angered many people. Logan was shocked when his 7-month-old son, Gabriel, goes missing, but Elizabeth is given only a light sentence. The prosecutor's office said they had no evidence to prove Elizabeth harmed or killed Gabriel, so no other charges could be brought against Elizabeth. Elizabeth denied the story she told Logan over the phone after Gabriel's disappearance. She continued to deny murdering her son, claiming instead that she gave the child to a couple. She explained that the message and call were meant to anger Logan. And she lied about the boy's body being in the dump. Detectives repeatedly questioned her in prison, trying to get information about Gabriel. Throughout this time, she never cooperated with the investigation, nor did she share anything with Logan or her lawyer. Elizabeth insisted that she knew nothing about Gabriel's condition. She also has no interest in knowing what happened to her son or where he is now. Logan was convinced that the child had been dead for a long time, believing she had indeed disposed of him at the dump, as she mentioned in the message. A recording of a phone conversation between Elizabeth and her old friend Temmie surfaced. Elizabeth was aware that all prison calls were recorded, so she deliberately lied to distract the detectives. During the call, she praised the detectives for their work but then expressed outrage. Then, she confesses that Temmie ruined her life. Temmie got her involved in illegal activities. Temmie's reaction seemed genuine, as she denied all of Elizabeth's accusations. The two women ended up blaming each other for their problems, which ultimately ended their friendship. It remains unclear who was lying during the call. In 2014, Elizabeth was released from prison and placed on probation for 3 years. However, she repeatedly violated the terms. Just a month later, she moved to New Mexico, which was a serious violation since she was required to regularly report to her probation officer. As a result, Elizabeth was arrested and extradited back. She was briefly imprisoned again. Meanwhile, the search for Gabriel continued, without success. Police occasionally receive new leads, but all lead to dead ends, including DNA analysis, reviewing CCTV footage, tracking geolocation, and searching databases. No matter how hard they tried, the boy was never found. After serving her prison sentence, Elizabeth was released. She changed her name several times to start anew and eventually got married, settling in New Mexico. In May 2021, she became pregnant again. This caused controversy. Many criticized Elizabeth, believing she shouldn't become a mother again, fearing she might abandon or harm the child. When speaking to reporters, Elizabeth continued to deny all allegations. In an interview, she claimed that her worst punishment wasn't prison but living without knowing Gabriel's fate. She insisted she had changed and regretted giving her child away, but few believed her. Gabriel's father, Logan, has devoted a great deal of time, effort, and resources to searching for his son. Years later, he had a new family, but he still hoped to find his first child. Although Logan tried his best, but the fate of Gabriel remains a mystery known only to Elizabeth. Logan continues to hope that Elizabeth will eventually reveal the truth so he can find his son. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Reagan Hancock. On the morning of October 9, 2020, Reagan's mother went to visit her pregnant daughter and discovered her body lying on the floor. Reagan, then 22 years old, had been brutally beaten and stabbed to death. Her unborn child had been removed from her womb and kidnapped. Born on November 14, 1998, in Howe, Arkansas, Reagan was part of a large Christian family that included a younger sister and several half-siblings. Reagan also had a 3-year-old daughter, Kinley, from a previous relationship. Unfortunately, Kinley's father had passed away. She had recently remarried to Homer Hancock and the couple had just moved into a new home. Reagan and her husband were eagerly preparing for the birth of their child, due November 10, 2020. They had purchased all the necessary supplies and her parents had chosen the name for their child, Braxton Sage. Reagan and Homer worked hard to support their family. Despite swelling in her feet, Reagan continued to work at a fast food restaurant. She had plans to attend college, but postponed it due to her first pregnancy. Her husband Homer worked in the freight industry. On October 9, 2020, at 8:30 a.m., Homer started receiving unusual messages from her. Reagan expressed that she wanted to be happy, but things weren't going well. Homer was confused and worried about what was happening. He replied to her messages, told her he loved her, and tried to call, but she didn't answer. At 9:30 a.m., a neighbor texted Homer and said their puppy was outside. The neighbor came to their house and found the garage door open, which was strange since no one was home. Worried, Homer tried to contact Reagan again but got no response. He called everyone he could think of, but no one had any information. Finally, he called Reagan's mother and asked her to check on Reagan. Since he was away from home, he took the day off from work and rushed back. Reagan's mother arrived at the house at 10:15 a.m. and found a horrifying scene. It was her worst nightmare, and she immediately called the police. When Homer arrived, officers were already at the scene and wouldn't let him enter. The officers were stunned by what they saw. Blood covered the floors, walls, ceiling, and furniture. Reagan was found lying face down, severely beaten with multiple defensive wounds on her arms, showing that she had fought back. It was clear that her death was extremely cruel. Concerned for the baby she was carrying, Reagan's mother asked the police to check. When they turned Reagan over, they discovered a large cut in her abdomen, and the baby was missing. Police believed the attacker primarily targeted the baby. Reagan's 3-year-old daughter, Kinley, was safe and hiding in another room during the incident. Forensic scientists quickly arrived to investigate the crime scene. Around 10 a.m., police pulled over a car for speeding. Taylor Renee Parker was driving with a newborn baby on her lap, and the umbilical cord had not been cut. The other end of the cord was tucked into her pants. She stated that she had just given birth while driving and that her baby was not breathing and needed urgent help. The police found it strange that there was no blood on the seat. They called for an ambulance and began performing artificial respiration on the baby. An ambulance arrived and took Taylor and the baby to the hospital, but hours later, the baby was dead. Doctors began examining Taylor, but she resisted. During the examination, they discovered that she was not bleeding. A hormone blood test showed that she was not pregnant. The baby was small and premature, born at 35 weeks. Taylor initially said that she was pregnant with the baby. She staged the scene with the umbilical cord to make the police believe that the baby was hers. The police later discovered that the baby was not hers. They returned to the hospital and arrested Taylor. Taylor, a 27-year-old friend of Reagan, was excited when Reagan announced her second pregnancy on social media. Later, Reagan reached out to Taylor, who was also expecting, and they formed a friendship. The two girls lived close to each other. Taylor resided in the nearby town of Sims, Texas, about 15 kilometers from Reagan's home in New Boston. They frequently communicated online and occasionally met for walks. They had much in common, both preparing for childbirth, shopping for baby items, attending prenatal classes, and sharing their experiences. Taylor's relationships have been complicated. She has a daughter and a son from 2 previous marriages, both of whom live with their fathers and are already in school. Taylor lost custody of them and has had very little contact since then. Taylor formed a close bond with Reagan, even filming their wedding, but during this time, she was misleading both Reagan and her fiancé, Wade Griffin. At the start of her relationship with Wade, she lied about being an heiress to a multi-million-dollar fortune, claiming her family were oil tycoons. Later, she told him she had ties to the Mexican mafia and needed his protection, asserting that her presence caused a major shootout involving the FBI, which she insisted must remain secret from the media. Wade believed her and became involved in expanding his farming business at her urging, which led him to buy more pigs and cows. He took out a loan for these purchases, thinking he would repay it with the inheritance Taylor promised him. However, he never received any money and ended up in a tough financial situation. Later, Taylor became obsessed with the idea of buying a large hunting property valued at nearly $5 million, even though she didn't have the funds. She spoke to a realtor, claiming to be the heiress of a multi-million-dollar fortune from syrup producers, despite having previously said her family was involved in the oil industry. They reached an agreement to buy a plot of land for $3.5 million, making an initial deposit of $200,000 that Taylor borrowed from Wade. At that moment, Taylor felt proud and shared the exciting news with her family, giving everyone postcards featuring a photo of the property and saying they could go hunting there. However, the deal ultimately fell through because she could not afford to pay the remaining amount. Initially, Taylor claimed that the syrup company would pay $7 million, but that money never arrived. At that time, Taylor was intensely motivated to purchase her dream home, which cost $20 million, a sum she didn't have. She falsely claimed that a wealthy uncle could provide the money, but then she vanished again. Concerned, the realtor attempted to contact both Taylor and Wade, unaware of the ongoing deception. Taylor eventually presented the realtor with documents claiming she had inherited $370 million, but these documents were fake. As a result of her lies, her relationship with Wade was on the brink of collapse. Feeling that she might lose Wade, Taylor decided to have a child to strengthen their bond, but she faced challenges getting pregnant due to her hysterectomy. Thus, she devised a scheme for a fake pregnancy. In February 2020, she told Wade they were expecting a baby in July. Taylor shared an ultrasound photo on social media, but it was actually an image of her other daughter. There are some people who know the whole story about Taylor and know that she cannot conceive. They discussed this in a conversation and are confused about why she would fake her pregnancy, believing it to be a tactic to keep her husband. However, they do not know her true intentions. Additionally, Taylor's family knows that she cannot conceive and suspects that she fabricated this pregnancy to keep Wade with her. They believe this is a hoax on her part. Recognizing her behavior, her relatives suspected that Taylor's false pregnancy would soon result in a miscarriage, and that would be the end of it. However, they never imagined she would go to the lengths of committing murder to obtain a child. While pretending to be pregnant, Taylor continued to seek approval from Wade's family, who were not fond of her. Knowing that Wade's mother had a crush on a Nissan Altima Platinum, Taylor bought one for her, much to her delight. Unfortunately, Taylor later claimed that the car had been repossessed by the dealership. Wade and his mother were hopeful for its return, but that never happened. Wade then contacted the dealership to inquire about the new car, only to learn that it had not been recalled, rather, it had been sent back to the showroom because they hadn't paid for it. This revelation shocked Wade, but he chose to remain silent because he did not want Taylor to be stressed during her pregnancy. Taylor attempted to persuade her friends and family that she was pregnant. She shared ultrasound images and test results, claiming that her pregnancy was a blessing from God. Before the pregnancy, Taylor had told Wade and his family that her mother had committed his own life, likely to gain sympathy. However, everyone was shocked when Taylor's mother appeared at the Christmas party, as they believed she was dead. In mid-September 2020, just a couple of weeks before the due date, Taylor's ex-husband contacted Wade and claimed that she couldn't have children and was lying to him. Taylor then showed ultrasound pictures from a previous pregnancy and provided fake test results. She reassured Wade that her ex was trying to ruin her life and their happiness. Taylor promised Wade that she would soon give birth, proving that her pregnancy was real and that she wasn't lying. As October began, Wade asked about the baby's condition. She replied that the baby would come when the time was right. Meanwhile, Wade's mother expressed doubts about Taylor's pregnancy, insisting that Taylor was cheating on him. This caused Wade to distance himself from his mother because she did not trust him. Early on the morning of October 9th, Taylor felt it was time to act. She stopped at Walmart to shop, then grabbed breakfast at McDonald's while watching a video about a 35-week cesarean, which was the stage her friend Reagan was in. Taylor texted Reagan at 7 a.m., saying she was coming to visit. Taylor had made friends with several pregnant women online. She developed a sense of trust with them and eventually decided that Reagan would be the easiest target to kill. Reagan was the kindest and most trusting of the group, making her an ideal victim. Taylor was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, kidnapping, and the murder of a child. However, she denied having planned the crime. Taylor claimed that when she visited Reagan, Reagan attacked her, and she used a knife in self-defense. Why didn't Taylor have any injuries after such an intense fight? She couldn't explain it, but she did share how the child ended up in her care. According to Taylor, Reagan was so injured that she felt the baby was dying inside her. Reagan begged Taylor to help, asking her to deliver the baby and take it to the hospital to save its life. Taylor was reluctant at first, but Reagan pleaded with her. At Reagan's insistence, Taylor attempted to save the baby. Taylor happened to have a scalpel and used it to cut into Reagan's abdomen to remove the baby and take the baby to the hospital. However, if this was the case, why did Taylor lie to the police who pulled her over, claiming that she had given birth? Taylor also later mentioned that Reagan's daughter, Kinley, left the room because of the screaming while Taylor was in surgery, and the girl testified to everything. This incident resulted in psychological trauma for Kinley. Additionally, Reagan's phone was never found. It seems Taylor turned off the phone and threw it away. When questioned, Wade said that he was not allowed to touch Taylor's stomach and not allowed to sleep with her to protect the baby, and that he believed her without question. Police believed Wade's story and he did not face any criminal charges. Taylor was transferred from Oklahoma to a prison in Texas, and her trial began in September 2022. Attorneys attempted to dismiss the kidnapping charges, arguing that the baby was not yet full term, but the judge rejected their arguments. The defense did not present any witnesses. Not even Taylor's mother or relatives were willing to testify on her behalf. During the trial, Taylor's ex-husband provided testimony. He said that Taylor constantly simulated seizures and health problems to arouse his pity. When he decided to end their relationship, Taylor suggested they have a child, even though she was unable to conceive again. She proposed using a surrogate mother, funded by her wealthy relatives, but he turned her down. After their divorce, a hurt Taylor spoke negatively about he to her friends, alleging that they had still planned for a surrogate mother together, but claimed that he had cheated on her with the surrogate, which made it impossible for her to forgive him. While her lawyers claimed she was insane, a psychiatric evaluation confirmed that although she had mental health issues, she was sane. In prison, Taylor exhibited aggressive behavior. Police discovered a map of the prison in her cell, indicating she was planning an escape because she was facing the death penalty. During her final hearing, her defense attorneys argued that Taylor was trapped in a desperate situation due to her fake pregnancy. Everyone, including her mother, knew the pregnancy was wrong, but no one offered to help her, which led her to take drastic action. Taylor had planned the murders for a long time and specifically targeted pregnant women she met online. She eventually chose Reagan as her victim. Reagan's mother described Taylor as a vicious person and called for the death penalty for her daughter's brutal murder. During the attack, Reagan fought desperately for her life and that of her child. She almost lost a finger in defending herself. Because she was pregnant, Reagan was especially vulnerable and unable to fight back. She suffered over 100 wounds to her body, including 39 to the head. The prosecutor concluded his argument by once again showing haunting crime scene photos. The prosecutor argued that Taylor deserved the death penalty for his horrific crimes. Throughout the trial, Taylor remained emotionless, showing no remorse even during the trial. On November 11, 2022, the jury deliberated for only 1 hour before finding Taylor Renee Parker guilty and sentencing her to death. Following the trial, the community came together to support the Reagan family, organizing a fundraiser for Homer and her 3-year-old daughter, Kinley. They also raised funds by selling T-shirts. Homer has been raising Kinley as his own since the tragedy and only returned to the house once after Reagan's murder to collect some belongings before moving out with her. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Mallory Beach. Mallory Beach was born on April 18, 1999, in Walterboro, South Carolina, USA. She had 2 older sisters, Morgan and Savannah. At 19, Mallory graduated from Hampton High School and then attended the University of South Carolina. She worked at clothing boutiques in Fort and dreamed of becoming an interior designer. She loved animals, she had dogs and volunteered at an animal shelter. She was a bright and beautiful girl who was sweet, kind, and sociable, with many friends. She was dating Anthony Cook. They were friends with 20-year-old Paul Murdaugh, who came from a wealthy and influential family. On February 23, 2019, the group planned to attend a party at a house owned by the mayor's family. They decided to travel there using the Murdaugh's 5-meter sea hunt boat. The group included Mallory, her boyfriend Anthony, Anthony's cousin Connor, Connor's girlfriend Miley Altman, Paul, and Paul's girlfriend Morgan. All were under 21, but that didn't stop them from obtaining alcohol and drinking on the boat. Although they could have reached by car, they chose to go by boat to drink beer and other alcoholic drinks en route without encountering the police. Paul was driving the boat and had already been drinking. He used his older brother Buster's ID to buy alcohol at the store, which he was quite proud of. After arriving, they enjoyed drinking and eating oysters. The party went well, and 5 hours later, they headed back home. Paul, now quite drunk, was still steering the boat. He stopped at a bar along the shore to buy more alcohol and drank there with Connor, while their other friends waited outside, eager to get home. At around 2 a.m., Paul and Connor left the bar. Everyone boarded the boat to head home. Under the influence of alcohol, Paul's behavior worsened, and he became aggressive. For half the night, Paul was in his underwear, saying he was hot, despite the cold February weather. His friends even suspected he might have taken illegal substances earlier, as he occasionally did so. Anthony, who was much more sober than Paul, wanted to take control of the boat, but Paul refused, insisting it was his boat. The other friends tried to convince he to let Anthony steer, but which nearly led to a fight on board. Anthony asked he to drop them off at the nearest pier, but he refused and mockingly suggested they call an Uber, knowing they were on a river with no access to cars. His behavior was inappropriate, and his friends argued with him. Paul repeatedly walked away, leaving the wheel unattended. He shouted at his girlfriend, Morgan, then hit her, spat on her, and pushed her so hard that she fell. Mallory and Anthony were upset by this and stayed at the stern of the boat. After seeing he hit and pushed Morgan, Mallory yelled at him to stop and calm down. However, he ignored her, angrily glaring before returning to the steering wheel. In anger at Mallory, he accelerated the boat. It sped up so much that the friends were thrown about. Anthony and Mallory clung to each other, but they couldn't hold on for long. At 2:20 a.m., the boat crashed into a bridge, causing the friends to fall into the water. When Anthony surfaced, he was quickly swept to the other side of the river by a strong current, but Mallory wasn't with him. Everyone except Mallory managed to swim to the shore. She was nowhere to be found, despite their calls and searches. Anthony returned to his friends and searched the water for she, but he couldn't find her. The boat had no lights, and although they used flashlights, the darkness made it difficult to see. Meanwhile, Paul lay in the mud under the bridge, unable to get up. It was cold outside, and the water was freezing in February. Connor called 911 at 2:26 a.m. Anthony continued searching for Mallory in the water, while Miley stayed on the shore. Morgan, Paul's girlfriend, had hit her head severely and was bleeding. After the call, Connor and Miley climb up the bridge to see if they can see Mallory from up there, but they still didn't see her. Paul went on the boat to be with Morgan. The police and ambulance arrived promptly to aid Morgan, and the search for Mallory commenced. Meanwhile, Paul remained on the boat in his boxers, speaking on the phone and gesturing. When Paul finally left the boat, he was smiling and behaving as if nothing had happened. He did not join the search for Mallory, which angered Anthony so much that he nearly attacked Paul, but the police stepped in to prevent it. The Coast Guard informed all ships to search for Mallory in the water. Meanwhile, Paul, Connor, Miley, and Morgan were taken to the hospital for treatment. Anthony stayed back to search for Mallory, despite he being soaked and very cold. At the hospital, the police came to question everyone, but Paul's father, Alex, and grandfather intervened. The Murdaughs, Paul's family, were wealthy and influential. Since 1920, they had held the position of chief prosecutor in the district. They also had their own law firm and were prominent in private practice across the district. They used their influence to pressure the police and hinder the investigation. Night searches for Mallory failed, and the next day, a large-scale search involving divers and helicopters began. Anthony did not go to the hospital and instead continued looking for she at the river. He spent days helping rescuers search for her. Volunteers eventually found her body on March 3rd, about 5 miles from the boat wreck site. An autopsy revealed that she died due to drowning and head trauma from a blunt object. She had hit her head, lost consciousness, drowned, and the strong current carried her away from the accident site. About 500 people attended her funeral. It was clear that Paul's irresponsible behavior and drunken boat driving caused this tragedy. However, the influential Murdaugh family went to great lengths to keep Paul out of prison. The police stated that it was unclear who was steering and who accelerated the boat. Paul denied being responsible, though he couldn't recall who it was. However, everyone else on the boat claimed it was Paul. The police argued that the friends' statements were unreliable because they might have been intoxicated. Paul's blood alcohol content was 3 times the legal limit. Investigators found beer and other alcoholic drinks in the boat's refrigerator. CCTV footage showed Paul buying alcohol at a local store, appearing pleased after the purchase. Moments later, he was seen crawling around the boat's refrigerator with beer. The boat's GPS indicated that the friends stopped at the pier around 12:45 a.m. Surveillance videos captured Paul and Connor at a bar, and later, the footage showed all the friends returning to the boat. Mallory family was frustrated with the inadequate investigation of the case, and the perpetrator will likely go unpunished. They initially filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the store and the individual who sold alcohol to Paul, but it was dismissed. Subsequently, they sued Buster had allowed Paul to use his ID to buy alcohol. This lawsuit was filed on April 18, 2019, which would have been Mallory's 20th birthday. Paul faced 3 felony charges: boating under the influence causing the death of Mallory and injuring 2 others, Connor and Miley. He pleaded not guilty to all charges and was released on a $50,000 bail awaiting trial. His bail conditions allowed him to travel, consume alcohol, and operate a boat. At his court appearance, Paul, dressed in a plaid shirt, sat in the hallway on the phone, never handcuffed or in a prison uniform, and had never been jailed. While the trials are about to take place, a tragic incident occurred. On June 7, 2021, Paul and his mother, Maggie, were found shot to death at their home near the dog kennels. Alex discovered them at 10 p.m. when he returned. Paul was shot in the chest and head with a shotgun, while Maggie was shot in the head with a rifle. Only shell casings were found at the scene, suggesting two different weapons had been used, leading police to suspect two perpetrators. The shootings occurred between 9 and 9:30 p.m., shortly before Alex arrived. Paul's phone was found in an unusual position, as if tampered with, and Maggie's phone was missing. It was later located outside the residence using the Find iPhone feature. Fingerprints and DNA from the killer were collected from it. The Beach family sent a letter of condolence to the Murdaugh family. They extends their deepest and warmest sympathies to the Murdaugh family during this terrible time. Having suffered the devastating loss of their own daughter, they praise that the Murdaugh family can find some peace after this tragic loss. They sincerely hopes that someone will come forward and cooperate with the police so that the perpetrator of these senseless crimes can be brought to justice. The police have classified the deaths of Paul and Maggie as a double murder. However, there are currently no suspects, even though the investigation is still ongoing. Many have speculated whether their murders may be related to Mallory's previous boating accident. But this connection has not been confirmed. Everyone present on the boat that day provided their fingerprints and DNA samples, which did not match those found on the phone of Maggie. While details about the case remain largely undisclosed, it's known that the Murdaugh family had several enemies and received threats, but they ignored these threats. Mallory's death is not the only one linked to the Murdaugh family. Years ago, their 50-year-old housekeeper was found dead. On February 26, 2018, she allegedly tripped and fell to her death. The Murdaughs paid her family $500,000, and the case was not pursued further. Before that, on July 8, 2015, the body of 19-year-old Stephen Smith, who supposedly had a relationship with Murdaugh's family's eldest son, was discovered on a sandy road. Stephen's face was badly beaten, with a hole on the right side of his forehead and numerous bruises and cuts on his body. However, his clothes and shoes were intact, and his phone and car keys stayed in his pocket. Stephen's car was found several miles away. The medical examiner determined Stephen was hit by a car, despite the lack of skid marks, headlight fragments, or any evidence of an accident. The blow only affected his head. It was suggested that a large vehicle, like a truck, might have struck his head with its side mirror, but the origin of the hole in his head was unexplained. It was also odd that his keys and phone remained in his pocket after such a strong impact. Many believed he had been beaten to death, yet the police closed the case. Rumor has it that everyone is afraid of getting involved with the powerful Murdaugh family, which led to these cases remaining unexplored. In 2021, Connor, one of the boat passengers, also sued the Murdaugh family for trying to blame him as the boat's driver. In memory of Mallory, a non-profit charity called Moll's Buddy was created, which raises funds to build a new animal shelter in Hampton County, South Carolina. Alex Murdaugh was arrested in July 2022 after a Culloden County grand jury returned an indictment charging him with 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of possession of a weapon during the commission of a violent crime in the deaths of Maggie and Paul. The indictment said Alex shot his wife with a rifle and shot his son with a shotgun. He was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole on all 4 counts on March 3, 2023. However, Alex maintained his innocence. He soon filed for a new trial, alleging that the court clerk had tampered with the jury. A new trial court judge denied the request in January 2024. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sion Kingi. Sion Kingi was born in New Zealand on December 16, 1974. When she was 7, her family moved to New Zealand, a small coastal town in Australia with a population of about 5,000. The area is known for its warm, pleasant climate. From a young age, Sion was a kind and gentle person who loved sports, particularly ballet and netball. Although she was naturally modest, she had a charming personality that made her popular among her peers. Sion was tall, had long blonde hair and striking eyes, which helped her stand out in school. Unfortunately, her beautiful appearance eventually led to serious consequences in her life. Friday, November 27, 1987, was an ordinary day. It was a beautiful sunny day. Typically, this time of year features perfect weather, warm sun and a cool breeze, so many locals were enjoying the beach. Sion's mother, Linda, went to the store to buy food and fabric to sew a lovely outfit for her daughter's upcoming birthday. After school, Sion got on her yellow bike, knowing she was going to the store to help her mother Linda choose fabric. Linda wanted to select something Sion would love, so she headed to the store right after classes ended. Once they chose the fabric for the dress, they were only free in the afternoon. After making their purchases, Linda planned to stop by the bakery to buy some treats for dinner. Sion was already feeling tired and wanted to head home. She asked her mother if she could go home by herself first. Her mother agreed, and Sion rode her bike along her favorite shortcut. While she had taken this route many times before, it didn't feel as safe today. In the 1980s, New York was a peaceful small town where everyone knew each other, making it one of the safest places in the area. The Kingi family's home was only a few kilometers from the local store, they easily reachable by bike in just a few minutes. Linda felt secure allowing her 12-year-old daughter, Sion, to ride there alone, as nothing bad had ever happened in their quiet town. In fact, her mother would follow her right after buying a few things. At 4:45 p.m., Sion rode her bike toward home, taking a path that went through the park, while Linda drove a different route in her car. Since Sion wasn't biking too quickly, she and her mother were only a few minutes apart. Linda anticipated arriving home just after Sion. However, when returned, Linda found no one at home. Sion was not there, and her yellow bicycle was missing. Initially, Linda wasn't worried about Sion's absence. The girl might have met a friend or stopped by to visit someone, especially with the weekend approaching after a long school week. Teenagers often hang out after classes, and Sion had many friends, so it was normal for her to drop in on someone. Sion had just picked out a beautiful fabric with her mother, Linda, and she could have wanted to share her weekend plans with a friend, as they were also planning to meet up. However, Linda soon began to feel anxious. Sion was well-behaved and never stayed out long without permission. Then, Linda decided to call several of Sion's friends to check if she was with them. To her dismay, no one had seen Sion. By 8 p.m., Sion still hadn't returned home. Although they lived in a small, quiet town with little traffic, Sion always respected the curfew and never wandered outside after dark. On Friday evenings, people often relax and take walks after work. As darkness falls, even the safest towns can become risky. Linda recognized this, so she chose to walk the route that Sion typically took on her bike. This path was the quickest way from their home on the outskirts to the shops in the city. Linda and her husband walked together, and about halfway there, they discovered Sion's yellow bicycle abandoned, but they did not see the girl. The abandoned bike raised concerns, especially since it was Sion's first bike, one she had cherished and would never willingly leave behind. Unfortunately, they couldn't find Sion nearby. Her parents called for her, but there was no answer. They decided to head to the police station. Before leaving, they checked their house to see if Sion had returned and bring a picture of her. With the photo in hand, they went to meet the police. The officers took their report about Sion's disappearance and officially declared her missing. The community was tight-knit, and the city had an extremely low crime rate, so everyone believed Sion would be found quickly. This situation seems to stem from a simple misunderstanding. Sion might have been hanging out with friends or got lost while walking in the forest. However, one officer recalled that there had been a kidnapping in the area shortly before this incident. To address the situation, the police reached out to local media, as they did not have access to social networks or the internet at the time. The following morning, a report about Sion's disappearance was broadcasted in hopes of finding witnesses who might have seen her the night before. Several people came to the police station with information, but they all insisted they hadn't noticed anything suspicious. These witnesses had seen Linda and Sion while they were picking out fabric for a dress, but none of them saw Sion on their way home, and no one was on the path at that time. The witnesses provided varying details and tried to highlight any unusual occurrences, such as strange cars or odd behavior from local residents. However, they saw that was watching Linda and Sion. A witness reported seeing a dirty white station wagon on the evening of the incident. When police were notified, they discovered the car contained a dark-haired man and a heavy-set woman. They seemed to be aimlessly driving around, possibly searching for someone. It's conceivable that Sion might have come into contact with them. Witnesses noticed this suspicious couple shortly before Sion went missing. The police working on the case noted there were approximately 170,000 station wagons in the area, with about 10,000 of them being white. As a result, the search area has been much wider. Investigators needed to examine all the cars in the region and pursue additional leads. Many police officers and hundreds of volunteers joined the search. Friends, family, neighbors, and members of the community came together to assist in the search for Sion. Ground and air search teams were organized, and photographs of the location where Sion went missing were taken and shared with the media. This method is often used to help potential witnesses recall details about what happened that day. No one was able to provide useful information to the police at first. However, by Sunday, several new witnesses came forward and aided the investigation. The first witness was sunbathing by a stream in the forest when she was attacked by an unknown man. He harassed her and attempted to drag her into his car, which was identified as a white Kingwood station wagon. A second witness saw the incident and assisted the girl in fending off her attacker. Afterward, this witness followed the suspicious vehicle when the driver tried to flee the scene, but he eventually lost sight of them. He managed to give a detailed description of the car and provided the police with its license plate number, 429. The detectives decided to check the phone number associated with the car with that plate number. They found that this number was registered in the area. It belonged to a woman named Valmay Beck. The detectives quickly located her address and visited her home. A man answered the door and confirmed he knew Valmay. He explained that he was not her relative, but her stepson. He also added that her husband was Barry, and they had been married for a year. The description of Barry's closely matched the composite sketch created from the witness's account of the attack near the stream. The suspect's name was Barry Watts. However, the police lacked sufficient evidence to arrest him or accuse him of kidnapping Sion. Despite this, both Barry and Valmay were viewed as potential suspects in the case. Unfortunately, the man didn't know Barry and Valmay's whereabouts. They frequently moved and rented different places, which seemed suspicious. 3 days after Sion disappeared, another witness came forward with information. This witness also reported seeing a white Holden Kingwood near the creek and described the driver as athletic, mentioning a plump woman who was acting suspiciously. After conducting a background check on Barry and Valmay, the police discovered that both had recently been released from prison in Perth, Western Australia, right before Sion went missing. Both Barry and Valmay had extensive criminal records. Just weeks prior, they relocated to Queensland from Perth, pausing their criminal activities after serving their parole. They arrived in a sedan but quickly switched to a white station wagon, which had been linked to several suspicious incidents. The police recognized that they were dealing with dangerous individuals with a long history of armed robberies, break-ins, and forgery related to obtaining fraudulent documents. This was just a portion of Barry and Valmay's criminal history. This news was alarming for the Sion family. If their daughter, Sion, became involved with these individuals, her chances of being found alive and safe were slim. At the time, Barry was 33 years old, and Valmay was 43. Valmay had 6 children from previous relationships. Both police and Sion's family viewed Barry and Valmay as particularly dangerous criminal wanted. The authorities urgently needed to locate them to investigate their connection to Sion's disappearance. 6 days after Sion went missing, a man named Tim visited the police station to report bad news. He reported that the night before, as he was heading to work, he noticed a terrible, foul smell that initially made him think an animal had died nearby. On his way back, he felt compelled to check the area again and was hit by a strong smell of decay. At the side of the road near the stream, he discovered the body of a teenage girl. She was wearing a school uniform and had blonde hair. The police quickly arrived at the location provided by Tim and discovered the mutilated body of a schoolgirl. It was evident that she had been sexually assaulted. The autopsy revealed that she had been strangled, and her body had 12 stab wounds, 3 near her heart and 2 cuts on her throat. Additionally, her spine was broken, and her arms were so badly damaged they were nearly severed from her body. The level of violence indicated that her death was extremely painful. The police suspected that this victim was the missing girl, Sion. She was wearing the same clothes as described by Sion's mother. In the laboratory, a forensic expert confirmed that the victim was 12 years old Sion Kingi. 5 days after this gruesome discovery, family Sion's and friends came together to say their final goodbyes at her funeral. During the ceremony, a classmate read a passage from Peter Pan, suggesting that the girl would always be remembered. Flowers were placed along the route where the young girl had been found. Following media coverage of the incident, a nurse named Nicole Close contacted the police. She reported having seen some suspicious individuals in the area, they driving a white station wagon. One evening, after finishing her shift at the hospital, Nicole was walking through the parking lot to her car when she noticed a white car entering the lot and slowly approaching her. Sensing something was off, she quickly ran to her car, jumped inside, and locked the door. The station wagon did not back away but parked next to her passenger door. A man then got out and approached her window, asking for help with directions. Although he seemed calm and friendly, but she felt uneasy and wanted to end the conversation quickly. She noticed a suspicious-looking woman in the station wagon and thought she saw ropes in the back, which heightened her anxiety. The man continued to speak politely and stepping closer. Despite Nicole explaining the directions multiple times, he kept asking the same question and moved closer to her. Just as he was only a few steps away, Nicole spotted another man walking through the parking lot. The driver noticed him too, which distracted him and gave Nicole the chance to escape. She quickly backed into her car, locked the door, and drove away. Nicole recalled that this incident occurred on November 2nd, before Sion went missing. Investigators viewed the reports about the white car as significant and pursued this lead. Detectives showed Nicole a lineup of photographs featuring unfamiliar faces, and she clearly identified Barry and Valmay. But the testimonies didn't end there. The day after Nicole spoke to the police, another eyewitness came forward with information about a different attempted kidnapping. He reported seeing a man attack a woman on the street, holding a knife to her throat and trying to drag her into a white station wagon. The victim fought back, injuring the attacker's hand with his own knife, and managed to escape. Police then discovered fingerprints belonging to Barry on the woman's car. She also identified Barry and Valmay as likely involved in kidnappings, rapes, and murders in the area. The officers recognized that they were dealing with particularly dangerous criminals who posed a threat to the entire community. They issued descriptions of the suspects, Barry and Valmay, and their white car, making the information public through the media. Although it seemed the criminals were in hiding, but arrest warrants have been sent to police departments nationwide, indicating the possibility that they will be caught soon. In a small town, a local power grid worker was installing wiring when he spotted a car that matched the description of Barry and Valmy's station wagon. He remembered it because of a media alert he had seen a few days earlier. After coming down from his work, he was convinced that this was the car the police were looking for. He quickly went to the police station to mark the location on a map where he had seen the vehicle. When the patrol officers arrived, Barry and Valmy had already fled. Although the police tried to chase them, they lost track of Barry and Valmy once again. Later, the department received a tip about a money transfer made by Barry and Valmy as they were leaving New South Wales. The station wagon was tracked to a motel parking lot, and fortunately, it was still there when the police arrived. The hotel staff allowed the officers to access Barry and Valmy's room. Understanding that they were dealing with potentially armed and dangerous criminals, the officers prepared their weapons. To their surprise, Barry and Valmy did not put up a fight and were arrested in the motel room. The police discovered wigs, hair dye, and a hair clipper, suggesting that they was attempting to change their appearance to evade capture. The suspects, Barry and Valmy, were interrogated for about 12 hours, during which they remained completely silent. Barry did not cooperate at all. He informed the police that he had conspired with his wife, Valmy, to ensure she maintained the same story and did not reveal any important information. In contrast, Valmy quickly gave in. She thought that by doing so, she could reduce her sentence. What she revealed to the authorities was chilling. On November 27th, Valmy claimed that she and Barry were driving around the city in search of a new victim. Barry had an obsession with violence against women, particularly targeting those who were much younger than him. His wife, Valmy, being 10 years older, did not fit his preferences. To fulfill his disturbing desires, Barry started to rape and murder girls who fit his idea of youth and beauty. Valmy claimed she went along with his actions because she was afraid of losing him. On the morning of Sion's disappearance, they spent several hours driving around, believing that finding a girl would be easy. However, most of the girls were with others, making it difficult to kidnap someone discreetly. Barry attempted to approach a number of girls himself, but they managed to evade him. Eventually, he realized that he was not as trustworthy as his wife, so he decided to use Valmy as bait to attract the girls. They parked near a local park and got out of the car. While walking along the trail, they noticed a girl on a yellow bicycle. Barry selected her as his target, and Valmy pretended to be in distress, asking the girl for help because she was having trouble with her dog. Sion, a kind-hearted girl, came Valmy and engaging in conversation. At that moment, Barry attacked Sion from behind, muffling her screams and dragging her into his dirty car. Inside, he restrained her with tape. Valmy sat in the back seat with Sion, while Barry drove away. They traveled 12 kilometers from where the abduction occurred and stopped in a forest. There, Barry laid out a blanket and started raping Sion for several hours, fulfilling his twisted desires. Valmy later reported that Sion showed incredible courage throughout the process of being raped by Barry, she enduring the abuse without crying. She complied with Barry's demands, hoping her obedience would somehow spare her life and that they might let her go. However, from the start, Barry never planned to let her live. His intent was to satisfy his twisted fantasies. Barry started to strangle the Sion and stabbed her with a knife, causing fatal injuries. Throughout this horrific scene, Valmy watched without intervening. She later reported that the belt used for strangling Sion, along with the knife and other items, were discarded nearby in a stream. The police went to the specified location, and Valmy provided them with details about the crime scene. They were able to recover evidence, including light-colored hair that seemed to belong to Sion. Valmy's confession took up 28 pages, describing the terrible ordeal the young victim Sion endured before her death. Although Barry remained unyielding during the interrogation, he became enraged upon learning of his wife's confession, Valmy. To ensure Barry was convicted, investigators attempted to extract a confession from him. However, they were unable to do so. As a result, they decided to use a complex strategy. They planned to place an undercover agent in the temporary detention cell where Barry was held. This spy will spend time with Barry as a fellow prisoner, aiming to establish a friendly relationship with him, which will hopefully lead to receiving a confession from him. A special spy was chosen for this dangerous mission because he was able to withstand the psychological pressure that the mission would cause. He was supposed to listen to Barry confess about the brutal treatment of Sion. But ultimately, this mission did not result in a confession. Meanwhile, Barry remained agitated and was desperately trying to escape punishment. During one meeting with his wife, Valmy, he subtly suggested that she should end her life before the trial to avoid testifying against him. He implied that if she chose not to, she would face serious consequences according to state law. Barry communicated with his wife very cautiously, carefully choosing his words to prevent the authorities from using their phone conversations against him. Fortunately, Valmy did not listen to Barry, which ultimately saved her life. When Barry and Valmy arrived at court, around 200 people were present, ready to confront the brutal murderers. During the trial, Valmy testified against her husband, Barry, portraying him as a true monster. She tried to defend herself by claiming she was coerced into the horrific acts. However, there was strong evidence suggesting she participated willingly. On October 20, 1988, the jury began deliberating on the verdict. After 3 hours, the jurors found the defendants Barry and Valmy guilty. Valmy Beck received a sentence of 10 years for kidnapping and life in prison for murder. However, due to her cooperation with the prosecution, she was granted the possibility of temporary release. The jury spent 6 hours discussing Barry's sentence. Finally, Barry Watts was found guilty of murder, kidnapping, and rape, receiving a life sentence without the possibility of parole. His case was officially archived, meaning he would not be eligible for release. However, the story of Barry and Valmy didn't end in prison. Barry started bragging about his crimes and told a cellmate that he had committed a similar offense. He mentioned the murder of 31-year-old teacher, Helen Marie Fenney, who went missing on October 29 of that year. Investigators later discovered that Valmy was also involved in this incident. Valmy admitted to witnessing her husband murder the teacher Helen, after which they placed her body in the trunk of their car and disposed of it in a landfill near Brisbane. Barry remained silent during police questioning, refusing to provide any information about the second victim, Helen. He seemed to hope to challenge the verdict in Sion's case in the future. However, in 2007, he confessed to murdering Sion and detailing the crime. Valmy endured assaults while in her cell, suffering regular beatings, including a severe head injury from a tin can. To ensure her safety, she was transferred to a more secure correctional facility. During her time there, she converted to Christianity and started to make positive changes in her life. Valmy applied for parole 3 times but was denied each time. In 2007, she divorced her husband, Barry. She also struggled with serious health issues, such as obesity and diabetes. In 2008, her health declined significantly, leading doctors to place her in an induced coma immediately after heart surgery. The police hoped that while she was on her deathbed, she would confess to additional crimes that she and Barry was suspected of, including numerous kidnappings, rapes, and murders in the area. Sadly, she passed away at the age of 64 without regaining consciousness, taking with her all the secrets of their horrific crimes. Hello again, true crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sharon Pryor. Sharon Pryor was born on February 9, 1959, in Montreal, Canada. Her mother, Yvonne Pryor, is from the UK, and her mother's family immigrated to Canada when she was very young. Her mother lived her entire life in Canada, where she met her future husband, George, a serviceman. The couple fell in love, got married, and later welcomed their daughter Sharon. Just before Sharon's second birthday, her mother gave birth to twin girls, Doreen Va Marine, in 1962. Then she had another brother, who was the youngest. In 1965, George was stationed elsewhere in a different location, leading to the couple's decision to divorce. While George continued his military career and moved frequently, Yvonne settled in an apartment in Lang, Canada, provided through a program for military families. This quiet and cozy place seemed perfect for raising her children. Yvonne, Sharon's mother, thought she had found a safe home for her family. But she was unaware that danger could lurk even in such peaceful neighborhoods. From a young age, Sharon is famous for being a very gentle person, beautiful, and caring. She was responsible, sincere, and kind, which drove her to help those in need. Consequently, she often rescued homeless animals, especially those that were sick or injured. This compassion inspired her dream of becoming a veterinarian in the future. Later on, Sharon joined a school club and began playing hockey. She was also very creative, dedicating her free time to art clubs and needlework classes. With her many talents, Sharon appeared to have a bright future ahead. Yvonne was thrilled to see her daughter blossoming into such a wonderful person. As Sharon's assistant, Yvonne was naturally cautious and tried to protect her from negative influences and trouble. Sadly, this caution could not shield Sharon from meeting a cruel man who came into her life. At 16, Sharon is a normal girl facing typical teenage problems. She loved the music of the time and had new hobbies that her parents didn't always support. During this time, she met a young man named John, who had admired her since the 4th grade. Eventually, they started dating in the presence of their friends and were seen as a close-knit and loving couple. Sharon's parents, recognizing their affection for each other, supported their relationship. According to Sharon's mother, they had a harmonious relationship with no conflicts, and Sharon was surrounded by good people. Unfortunately, they were unable to shield her from trouble. On March 29, 1975, everything was going on as usual. Sharon woke up and had breakfast. Her mother was out running errands, having gone to the store the day before Easter to buy food and gifts for her children. When her mother returned home with the shopping, Sharon, the eldest daughter, helped her unpack. This day was meant to be special for the family. Additionally, her mother's boyfriend and his son, Stephen, along with some friends, were planning to visit. Sharon spent most of the day painting Easter eggs and preparing for the holiday. Stephen arrived early and played with her younger brother. Afterward, Sharon got ready to go with Stephen to a sports and crafts association, where they were members. Sharon will go there to get a coat called Garl. This named after the brother of the organization's founder, who died of leukemia. This jacket represented membership in the association, but it wasn't given to everyone. The children had to earn it, for instance, by selling lottery tickets. Sharon was determined to get jacket and had successfully sold enough tickets. Excited, she went to the association to receive her personalized jacket. However, she was disappointed to find that they did not have her size available. As a result, Sharon had to return home empty-handed with Stephen, planning to come back for her jacket another day. Despite her disappointment, Sharon maintained the festive spirit. She joined her mother and boyfriend to help with the final preparations for the gathering. Once the guests arrived, Sharon and her mother hid Easter eggs for the children to find later. Sharon then asked to go to the local pizzeria, Marina, which was popular among teenagers. It was close to home, and her mother often allowed her to go there with friends. This time was no different. After receiving permission, Sharon went to her room to get ready. While Sharon was about to leave, the girl next door came to visit. Everyone chatted while Sharon got ready. She borrowed one of her mother's sweaters and put on her favorite suede jacket. Around 7 p.m., Sharon and her neighbor left the house, but Sharon went to the pizza shop alone because her neighbor changed her mind and didn't want to go anymore. They said their goodbyes. The girl next door went home, while Sharon headed to meet her friends at the pizzeria. A group of teenagers was already there waiting for Sharon, but she didn't arrive on time. The others assumed she was just late because she was with her boyfriend John, so they didn't worry and continued their evening at the pizzeria. At that time, several employees from the company were watching a hockey match at home. After the game ended, they headed to the pizzeria. Among them was John, Sharon's boyfriend, who was there without her and had no idea where she was. Like the others, he expected Sharon to be at the pizzeria by the time they arrived, and her absence worried everyone since she was usually very punctual. Meanwhile, Sharon's mother, Yvonne, was at home putting the younger children to bed and watching TV. She decided to wait a bit longer, thinking that Sharon might have lost track of time while spending time with a friend, and will return home later. She stayed in the living room, watching TV, so she wouldn't miss her daughter's return, but she still hadn't come home. Around 1 o'clock in the morning, Yvonne was overwhelmed with fear because there was still no news about her daughter, Sharon. It was too late to call Sharon's friends, so she had to wait until morning, look out the window occasionally. As dawn approached, Yvonne started calling Sharon's friends to find out where she was. Unfortunately, neither her friends nor John knew her whereabouts. She was deeply troubled to learn that Sharon had never been to the pizza shop that evening. The girl next door confirmed that they had said goodbye to Sharon on the street, and she hasn't seen Sharon since. When Yvonne spoke to Mary, Sharon's best friend, she became even more anxious. Mary said her that after 7 p.m. near the pizzeria, a 20-year-old girl named Cheryl Roy was attacked by a stranger with a knife. Fortunately, other passers-by heard Cheryl's screams, which scared the attacker away. Witnesses reported that the man fled in the direction Sharon would have taken to the pizzeria. They described him as tall, dark-haired, blue-eyed, and mustached. He spoke calmly and wore a ski jacket, blue jeans, and pointed-toe shoes. After hearing this, Yvonne panicked, realizing that the time and location of the attack matched with the route Sharon usually takes. She came to report to the police, but they have yet to come to any conclusions. The police were in no rush to charge anyone in the attack. Instead, they decided to immediately launch a search. Hundreds of people learned about the incident and came out to help search for Sharon, a 16-year-old schoolgirl. They received her photo and description to make the search easier. Her mother, Yvonne, appeared on television to inform everyone about her daughter's disappearance and urged anyone with useful information to contact the police. Unfortunately, despite their efforts, there were no new leads. Days went by without any updates on Sharon's whereabouts, but her mother continued to hope for her daughter's safe return. However, the police had already searched the area, and the chances of finding Sharon alive were dwindling. Sharon had no reason to run away from home. She had a good relationship with her parents and was dating a nice guy at school. Their relationship is built on love and understanding, and he didn't seem like someone who would harm her. Sharon also stayed away from troublemakers, so when she disappeared, the police had no leads or suspects. Attempts to locate a man with a knife seen nearby were unsuccessful. The investigation has not made any new progress in a long time, and Sharon's mother was devastated, but she still hoped for her daughter's safe return. On April 1st, around 6 a.m., Sharon's mother, Yvonne, noticed something unusual through the window. A familiar young man was leaving Sharon's house, crossing the street to retrieve a newspaper left on her doorstep. Sensing something was off, she called out to him, trying to understand why he was up so early and taking newspapers from house to house. He didn't respond and instead quickened his pace to leave. She rushed outside and caught up with him. He tried to keep the newspaper, but she managed to grab it from him. He shouted for her not to look, but she did anyway. On the main page, she was confronted with a heartbreaking photo of a girl's body found in the snow. This incident occurred in the suburbs, just a few minutes' drive from their home. She was not only shocked by the news but also because the police did not inform her, which they should have done. She learned about it later than many neighbors who had seen the latest news in the paper. She convinced herself that it wasn't Sharon but rather another girl who resembled her daughter. After gathering her thoughts, Yvonne called the police to dispute the newspaper's frightening headline. The detectives informed her that they had not yet confirmed if the body belonged to Sharon, which intensified her fear. Feeling overwhelmed, she asked for Sharon's father, George, to come to the area for her since she was in shock. The photograph of the victim bore a striking resemblance to her missing daughter, Sharon, and she was dressed exactly as Sharon's mother had described. When Sharon's father got there, he recognized his daughter, leaving no doubt that the 16-year-old schoolgirl was deceased. A local resident, Jacques, who had also read about the girl's disappearance in the newspaper, discovered the body. Upon recognizing the victim looked like Sharon, he immediately reported the grim discovery. Jacques usually made sure that all his doors were locked, but on Tuesday, he discovered that one lock was open and the door was unlocked. He thought it was strange that there were no signs of a break-in, as if someone had a key. The truth was, he was the only person with full access to the house. When he went outside to the driveway, he was shocked to find a woman's body lying there, naked from the waist down. Additionally, nothing had been taken from his home. Jacques was perplexed about why the body was found in that location. Patrol officers soon arrived, and a murder investigation began. They quickly noted that it was a brutal crime. Sharon had multiple signs of abuse, including bruises and hematomas. She was only wearing a suede jacket and a blue sweater, with her jeans located a few meters away and her underwear caught on a tree. Her mouth was tightly taped, with the tape tangled in her hair. She was gripping the tape in her hand, suggesting she had fought to remove it. There were clear indications that Sharon had attempted to rise, implying she was left alive during the horrific ordeal. Investigators found additional evidence about 15 meters from the body, including tire tracks leading from that spot to where the body lay, along with a trail of blood droplets. No signs of dragging were present. The investigators quickly concluded that multiple individuals may have been involved in this violent act. Sharon's socks and shoes showed no dirt, indicating she did not crawl on the ground by herself. Instead, she was carried out of the car and abandoned in the cold. Near her body, investigators found a man's shirt tied around her wrists, which helped determine the main suspect in the case is quite tall. Additionally, a clear footprint was discovered next to the entry gate post, providing further evidence. They also located a receipt for Garo jacket, which Sharon never received. After a forensic examination, it was determined that Sharon had died only a few hours before her body was found. It was clear she had been held captive for several days, from Saturday to Tuesday. The perpetrator had been extremely cruel, as there were signs of strangulation on her neck, and she had choked on her own blood. Forensic experts found that her ribs were crushed, indicating the killer may have been kneeling on her chest. She also suffered a severe head injury and bleeding from multiple stab wounds. Both sides of her jaw were broken, her nose was fractured, and her cheek was torn by a tooth that had been knocked out from the force of the attack. On April 4, 1975, about 200 friends, relatives, and local residents gathered at a community center. They hoped that the killer would soon be caught. 9 months prior to Sharon's murder, Another brutal crime occurred in Canada, the killing of a teenage girl in Chatoy. 12-year-old Norma O'Brien was murdered on the evening of July 9, 1974. After leaving home to play water polo, she discovered the pool was closed for repairs. Norma returned to the pond, but she never made it back home. That same evening, she was reported missing. The family was convinced that Norma would not have left on her own, so they started looking for her. The next day, her partially clothed body was discovered in a field near the pool. Norma's murder resembled that of Sharon, who was also found in the same area, brutally beaten and strangled. The two crime scenes were approximately a half-hour's drive apart, leading to speculation that they might have been committed by the same individual, although there is no definitive evidence to support this theory. Following Sharon's murder on June 23, 1975, 14-year-old Debbie Fisher disappeared in Chatoy while riding her red bicycle home. She was later found in the forest, unclothed but without signs of sexual assault. Debbie had died from a blow to the head with a stone. Subsequently, a 17-year-old male suspect confessed to the crime, but his identity is kept private due to his age. The suspect claimed that he was returning home on his moped around 6:30 p.m. when he spotted Debbie riding her bicycle and carrying milk. After observing her closely, he devised a sinister plan. He greeted her, and she responded in kind. He then overtook her, concealed his moped in the bushes, and sat on the curb, pretending to cry. Concerned, Debbie stopped, and the suspect called her over, prompting her to step closer to him. He grabbed her and began to assault her. He threw the milk into the field, and she lost consciousness. Then, he hid her bike in the bushes and attempted to rape her but was unsuccessful. In a fit of rage, he struck her on the head with a rock, causing her death. He concealed her body in an abandoned car in the forest and fled on his moped. Debbie's killer later admitted killing Norma O'Brien, but he denied any involvement in Sharon's killing. He had an alibi at the time of Sharon's murder, so he was not considered a suspect in that case. He was convicted of murdering two girls, Debbie and Norma, and due to his age, served only a few years in prison before being released. He now lives and works in Montreal, near the location where Sharon's body was discovered. Police gathered a significant amount of evidence related to Sharon's murder. However, the outcome was not what they had hoped for. 13 months went by without identifying a primary suspect for charges. They found 38 individuals who might be linked to that tragic night. 6 of these 38 individuals were detained, but ultimately, all were released due to a lack of evidence. Sharon's close friends were also interviewed, and they all had alibis. Some were at a pizzeria, while others were at home watching a game. The investigation became increasingly difficult and gradually reached a dead end as investigators could not find new clues. And it appeared that everyone had given up, except for the mother of Sharon's. Sharon's mother, Yvonne, was frantic as she tried to piece together what had happened to her daughter. Yvonne realized that Sharon couldn't have gone far from home by the time she left the house to go to the pizza shop. On the way, Sharon was supposed to meet a neighbor, who was also returning home from work. For years, the neighbor would walk the same path, but that day he claimed he didn't see Sharon on the sidewalk. Since Sharon had not traveled far, she should have been kidnapped right after saying goodbye to her friend. The kidnapper had only a few minutes to act, and somehow he managed to do it without being seen. Unfortunately, there were no witnesses to Sharon's abduction, making it seem like the perfect crime. Sharon's mother believed it was crucial to pay attention to all the neighbors on their street. Someone should have noticed the suspicious stranger or recognized him if he lived nearby. Detectives described the killer and rapist as being around 20 years old, likely living with his parents. They suspected that he had psychological issues, possibly including obsessive behaviors or hostility towards women. The detectives believed this crime was not the first committed by the suspect, and if he wasn't apprehended soon, it wouldn't be the last. They were convinced that several people were involved in both the kidnapping and the subsequent violence. It was also thought that one of the attackers could have been an unpredictable stranger with a knife who initially targeted another girl, Cheryl, but fled when come across by nearby witnesses. Witnesses described the attacker after Cheryl's assault. Despite thorough searches, he could not be found. It was statistically unlikely for two rapists and kidnappers to be active at the same time in one of the city's safest neighborhoods, prompting detectives concluded that the same person was responsible for the attack on Cheryl and the murder of Sharon. The attacker's behavior suggested he knew the area well, allowing him to navigate without leaving evidence or raising suspicion among residents. Detectives, along with Cheryl's mother, concluded that the assailant likely lived nearby. They characterized the attacker as a sadist. Typically, individuals with such tendencies follow a predictable pattern. They seek out compliant victims, initially presenting themselves as charming and sweet to gain trust. Over time, however, they become increasingly cruel and demanding. It all begins with control, followed by humiliation, and then they start mocking the victim. In this context, relationships with women often develop, and the sadist gradually shifts from seeking a partner to becoming a predator on the hunt. As a result, the police decided to thoroughly investigate all local residents with histories of harassment and domestic violence. Their goal was to find and question the knife-wielding attacker who had assaulted Cheryl. He matched the profile of the criminal, socially awkward and resorting to a knife instead of conversation. He was unlikely to be a successful individual or possess high intelligence. This type of person usually had a history of violence and preferred to use brute force to achieve his goals instead of clever tactics or deception. It was clear he lacked self-control, easily losing his temper and being ready to fight at any moment. The most alarming part of this situation is that the police are chasing a suspect who could be a serial killer, who needs to be stopped immediately. While he tried to run away from the detectives, they continued their search for him. Unfortunately, many crucial technologies we have today, such as DNA analysis, surveillance cameras, and phone geolocation, had not yet been developed at that time, leaving the investigators with limited resources. Although detectives investigated quickly and professionally, but 6 years after Sharon's body was found, the killer struck again. A 12-year-old girl named Temi was ferociously murdered. It is believed that the sadistic attacker, after assaulting a 16-year-old named Sharon, began targeting younger girls for his crimes. When Temi's body was discovered, it was revealed that the attacker had grabbed her and started to molest her. Then, he attempted to rape her but was unsuccessful. In a fit of rage, he struck her on the head with a rock, leading to her death. Although detectives investigated quickly and professionally, but 6 years after Sharon's body was found, the killer struck again. The second victim was a 12-year-old schoolgirl named Temi Leakey. She was ferociously murdered. It is believed that after attacking 16-year-old Sharon, the perpetrator chose to target younger girls for his crimes. When Temi's body was found, the same police officers who had been investigating Sharon's murder took on this case. They quickly noticed the similarities between the two murders, which further supported the theory of a serial killer. On March 20, 1981, Temi was visiting her grandmother when she disappeared just a few blocks from her grandmother's house. Later, Temi's mother found her glasses on the sidewalk. When she returned home, the woman immediately reported her daughter missing to the police. They identified a witness who saw a man in a beige raincoat get out of a small red car and force a screaming girl into it. That same evening, Temi was found barely alive on the street. A man came to the police station to report a serious matter. He saw Temi was naked and covered with clothes. Doctors worked hard to save her, but unfortunately, she died. The examination revealed that she had been strangled. Although she was not raped, there were traces of male fluid found on her clothes. The attacker had been careless, leaving behind enough evidence that connected this case to other brutal murders. Despite the detectives' efforts, the investigation hit a dead end. Meanwhile, in nearby areas of Canada, there were reports of similar assaults on girls and young women. In 1971, 17-year-old Lisa Blaze was found dead just a few meters from her home in Montreal. She had left a bar early in the morning, suffered a blow to the head, and was raped. This case has not yet been resolved. Because there are so many open cases, the police have difficulty determining whether these cases are related or not. In 2000, Sharon's mother reached out to the police, requesting a re-evaluation of her daughter's case using modern techniques. At that time, advancements in technology, especially in DNA analysis, had made it possible to investigate cases more effectively. However, a week later, she was disappointed to learn that most of the evidence from the year Sharon was murdered had disappeared. The few surviving items from 1995 included Sharon's clothing and belongings possibly linked to a suspect. Forensic scientists tested a shirt belonging to a man but found that the DNA did not match Sharon. Although no matches were identified in the database, the DNA sample was preserved for future comparisons with any suspects that might emerge later on. In June 2004, the police received a tip about a garage where Sharon might have been held by her killer. When detectives investigated, they found no new evidence. They collected 3 DNA samples from the site, but none matched Sharon's DNA or the materials found on her clothing. Ultimately, this lead turned out to be false. In 2012, a $10,000 reward was offered to anyone with information leading to the arrest of the killer of Sharon. This announcement suggested that the police might have new leads in the case and were seeking help from the public. They established a special hotline to make it easier for people to share information, and the investigation has been reopened. However, like previous efforts, this initiative did not result in any breakthroughs. Detectives revisited the case involving Cheryl's attack in hopes of identifying the perpetrator. They arranged for Cheryl to undergo hypnosis. During the session, she was shown photos of various men, including serial killer William Patrick Fife. She said her attacker looked very similar to William, a Canadian serial killer who was convicted of murdering 5 women in Montreal. He claimed to have had 9 victims, but authorities could only confirm 5. Detectives had long suspected his involvement in the girls' murders and tried to link him to these cases. However, he denied any guilt and claimed he only started killing in 1979. It's important to highlight that Sharon was murdered in 1975. Regrettably, no evidence was found that connected him to the case of Sharon's. Later on, investigators looked potential connections between the girls' murders and other dangerous criminals in Canada. One suspect was Mike French, a member of the Montreal biker gang Satan. He lived close to Sharon when she was killed in 1975 but moved away with his parents 2 years later. Those who knew him described him as aggressive and cruel, suggesting he could have been responsible for the girls' deaths. Some witnesses reported hearing Mike boast about his involvement in violent acts, but once again, the police faced challenges. Mike was killed in a gang conflict in November, taking with him any potential information about his connection to the murders. His murder also remains unsolved. Ultimately, all these leads were mere speculation. The Sharon family was outraged by the police's lack of professionalism. They committed to fighting for justice until the end, determined to find and hold the criminal accountable. Sharon's mother felt that this fight was not just for her daughter, but also for other parents mourning the loss of their children. In 2015, Sharon's mother was featured on television with 9 other families, accused the police of being unable to handle the case. A new development in the case occurred in June 2022 when a match was found in a DNA database through genetic genealogy. A DNA sample from a man's shirt discovered at the scene of Sharon's murder was matched to Franklin Maywood Romine, who had died in 1982. His body was exhumed for analysis, and DNA confirmation was obtained on May 2, 2023. Franklin resembled the suspect described by witnesses. He lived nearby where the attack occurred, and his car matched the tire tracks found near Sharon's body. He also had a troubled criminal history, including convictions for assault and rape. This evidence was crucial in resolving Sharon's murder case. Although no one could be charged or tried, investigators were able to bring closure to the case. The tragic murder of Sharon Pryor, a 16-year-old schoolgirl, has been solved, thanks to advancements in DNA testing and the determined efforts of her family. Mystery lovers, today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Anel Baez Alvarez. Anel Baez Alvarez was born on March 17, 1998, in Guamuchil, Sinaloa, Mexico. She was the second child of Ilda and Hugo, with an older brother named Omar. Later, the family welcomed a younger sister, Adriana. Initially, she was a shy child. She gradually became more confident, showing grace and charm. She was energetic and always tried to entertain those around her. Anel's father was a tailor, and the family was prosperous, close-knit, and happy. However, the family was no longer happy when Anel's mother was diagnosed with cancer in the early 2010s. The children had to grow up quickly to take care of her. After a tough battle with the illness, Ilda passed away in 2012. The family was devastated, but they didn't give up. They supported each other through the pain and trying to make life better. The tragedy brought the sisters, Adriana and Anel, so close that they shared everything, facing sadness and problems together. Anel remained a cheerful and friendly girl with a passion for dancing and music. As she entered high school, she became an ideal daughter, helping with household chores, caring for her younger sister, and keeping up her good grades. Cooking for the family became one of her favorite activities, especially making desserts, which became her specialty. Anel conquered her shyness and became one of the most popular girls at school. She also started a music group as a singer, where she developed a love for the ballad Amor Eterno. At the same time, Anel met someone who would become her best friend, at least for a while. Her name was Erandi Elizabeth Gutierrez. They became an inseparable duo, earning the admiration of everyone around them and being considered the most popular girls in school. They showed their friendship through social media posts. On October 14, 2012, Anel uploaded a photo with Erandi, expressing her happiness for their friendship. Anel thanked God for the chance to be close to her and even wrote that Erandi had become not just a friend, but a sister to her. Initially, everything was wonderful, but over time, the situation changed. Although they were the same age, their personalities were completely different. Anel was a sweet girl who loved love songs and spending time with her family. In contrast, Erandi lived in vice's environment and became increasingly involved with drugs, also known in Mexico as bucona. Erandi frequently attended events featuring musicians from this culture, such as the Caliber 50 concert during the Carnival celebrations in Guamuchil in 2014. She also had a very clear political stance. Once, Erandi posted on social media that she took part in a march in support of Joaquin Guzman Lora. On her page, she wrote, "March for El Chapo's freedom. We must rally behind this great cause." This message was accompanied by a photo. Unlike Erandi, Anel usually didn't share her point of view on social media and didn't agree with the views Erandi supported. As a result, the distance between them grew. In 2014, Erandi and Anel of them started attending Guamuchil High School at the Autonomous University of Sinaloa, but they barely spoke to each other. Each found her own group of friends. Anel began spending time with Melissa, Karen, Manuel, and Maria Jose. These friends had healthy lifestyles, followed her everywhere, and admired her. Maria, who had known Annel since elementary school, saw her as the leader of the group. Annel took on this role, and she always looking out for everyone. Annel was very polite and organized. Despite growing apart from Arandi, but she never told her father or siblings about their falling out. Around the same time, Arandi started acting strangely on social media. She posted negative and concerning messages on her page. Some posts were quite alarming, such as, pregnant 13-year-old girls taking psychoactive substances, and bizarre statements such as, her mom is upset that she killed her ex and buried him in her garden, or, it is fortunate that she is envied by the dead. The initial posts didn't make much sense, as Arandi took them from forums or songs. However, with time, some messages began to appear threatening. On February 5, 2014, she posted that she was going to bury someone by the end of the year. On February 23, she wrote that she might seem very calm, but in her head, she had killed the person at least 3 times, and every day her mind was filled with new ideas. A few days later, Arandi wrote that she thanked God no one heard her thoughts, and everything would definitely happen the next day. She kept writing more and more posts, and became very creepy. On March 3, Arandi posted, maybe not now and not tomorrow, but soon, she won't say anything to that person, but that person should know that she has destroyed them mentally. The last post was on March 16, where she wrote, this really drives she to despair. No one in her circle knew who these threats were directed at. However, rumors started to spread at school. Many said that Arandi was upset with Annel because they were no longer friends. Some even accused Arandi of being jealous of Annel because everyone liked her. However, Annel wasn't worried about Arandi's social media posts. She celebrated her birthday with a big party, wearing a beautiful pink dress, and was the star of the evening. Her life seemed perfect until March 19, when her absence raised concerns in her family. Hugo received a call from Adriana's school, informing him that Annel hadn't picked her up as usual. Initially, he wasn't too concerned, thinking she might have overslept or was with friends after school. He quickly went to pick up Adriana. On the way, Hugo tried calling Annel to see if everything was fine, but she didn't answer. He assumed she was probably still sleeping. After picking up Adriana, Hugo tried to contact Annel again, but she didn't answer. He repeatedly called her number, without success, which made him more worried. Hugo headed to her house in the Los Fuentes area. When he arrived, he noticed the front door was wide open. Upon entering the living room, both he and Adriana saw that some items had been moved. They thought it might have been a robbery. After that, they shouted Annel's name and searched desperately throughout the house, but they also couldn't find her. Finally, Hugo arrived in Annel's room and found the door locked, which worried him. He knocked several times, but Annel didn't answer. In desperation, Hugo broke down the door. Inside, he was shocked to find Annel's lifeless body on the floor, covered in numerous wounds with blood stains around. He immediately called the police, who arrived quickly. Upon examining the scene, the officers initially believed that a very strong person or a group had committed the crime. Although there were some blood stains, they were minimal, suggesting the attacker had attempted to clean them up. During the autopsy, the forensic expert revealed that Annel had suffered 65 stab wounds. The officers concluded that the attack was driven by someone with intense hatred towards her. The detectives noticed that the doors and windows were not forced, suggesting Annel knew the assailant and allowed them into the house. They even considered the possibility that Annel had planned to meet this person that day. However, a check of her mobile phone revealed no evidence of any invitation to her home. It seemed more likely that the encounter was by chance. With no surveillance cameras in the area, the officers interviewed neighbors. Some neighbors reported seeing a slender girl with black hair leaving the house. These accounts helped narrow down the suspects. Afterward, officers began questioning Annel's close friends and family. All her relatives had alibis and insisted that Annel had no enemies, was very friendly, and they couldn't imagine anyone wishing her harm. However, detectives found a post on Arandi's social network very suspicious, where she expressed shock at Annel's death. Some people offered their condolences, but others began accusing Arandi of being the murderer. The post quickly filled with comments blaming Arandi and claiming she was guilty. She then deleted her account's social network, but by then, it was too late. Police questioned several of Annel's friends to understand the relationship between Arandi and Annel. They all said that the two of them no longer played together, and it was clear that Arandi envied Annel for her greater popularity. After the interviews, detectives checked Arandi's social media profiles and found all the threatening posts she had made a few months earlier. However, that wasn't their only discovery. Just a few hours after it happened, Arandi posted that she was a fool and wondered what she had done. She was identified as the only suspect in the crime. This information was kept secret because officers worried Arandi might flee before they could arrest her. The agents patiently waited for the right moment. The case gained so much attention that hundreds of people gathered at a well-known funeral home in Guamachil to say goodbye to Annel. Friends, relatives, teachers, and classmates cried and hugged each other, struggling to believe that someone so young had passed away. Annel's funeral was very crowded, but two people were particularly noticeable, Arandi and her mother. Arandi entered the venue with her head down, and her long black hair partially hid her face. Her outfit was unusual for the hot weather. She wore a hoodie with the hood up and long sleeves, as if trying to hide something. Both she and her mother approached to offer condolences to Annel's family, then sat near the casket containing Annel's body. Everyone whispered and watched Arandi with tense expressions, noting how distressed she seemed. A few minutes after she arrived, officers quietly approached her and asked her to come with them to the police station. Arandi did not resist and went with the officer. The questioning started at the police station. At first, Arandi claimed to be innocent, but after a few questions, she broke down. She lifted her hoodie, showing scratches and bruises on her arms and torso. Arandi confessed that Annel caused these injuries while trying to defend herself. In December 2013, Annel posted a picture online with Arandi, where they appeared hugging, smiling, and partially naked. Arandi was upset because Annel posted a photo without her permission. She asked Annel to take it down, but Annel ignored her request. Eventually, Annel agreed to remove the photo, but by then, their friendship was broken beyond repair. The situation got worse when one of Arandi's classmates told her he had a compromising photo of her, which she suspected was the same one Annel had posted months earlier. From that point on, Arandi started thinking about how to get revenge. In the meantime, she expressed her anger on social media until she couldn't bear it anymore. On March 19, 2014, Arandi posted on her page, "In a world of 7 billion people, she only liked 3 of them." After that, she went to Annel's house in the Los Fuentes neighborhood. Arandi arrived at the door with 2 servings of ice cream and a big smile, saying she wanted to make amends and be friends again. Annel happily agreed and invited her inside. She even suggested they go upstairs to Annel's room on the 2nd floor to chat, just like old times. Once in the room, they started talking and eating ice cream. After a few minutes, Arandi suggested watching a movie. Arandi then said she needed to go to the bathroom and asked not to pause the movie. However, instead of going to the bathroom, Arandi went downstairs to the kitchen. She hid a sharp knife under her clothes and went back to the room where Annel was lying on the bed with her back to the door. Taking advantage of this, Arandi took out the knife and attacked her. Annel tried to defend herself by scratching, pushing, and punching, but she couldn't overpower Arandi. She lost too much blood and died, becoming a victim of a terrible crime. Arandi began to feel anxious, knowing she had to act quickly before Annel's family returned. She tried to clean up the blood using all the rags in the house, but there was so much that she could only clean a little. Eventually, she went to the bathroom, washed her hands, and changed into clothes from Annel's wardrobe. Then, Arandi closed the door to the room, leaving Annel's body inside, and ran out of the house, leaving the front door open. When Annel's relatives heard the story, they were outraged. They knew the tale about the photograph was false. Annel would never do such a thing, it wasn't in her nature. Additionally, Annel's friends stated they had never seen any such photograph. They argued that since both Arandi and Annel were quite popular, the photo would have certainly spread, and someone would have downloaded it. It became clear that envy was the real reason behind the crime. Nevertheless, the motive was no longer relevant. Arandi was the only suspect in the case. She was officially charged with involuntary manslaughter. The legal process moved quickly. Four officers escorted Arandi to the juvenile court proceedings at the prosecutor's office that handles cases involving minors. After a hearing lasting 1.5 hours, Arandi was found guilty. Even though it was clear she had executed a premeditated plan and the murder was intentional, but because she is only 16 years old, she was sentenced to 7 years in prison. She was transferred to the Juvenile Detention Center in Kaloa. Annel's family thought justice had been served and that it was all over, but they were very wrong. The defense filed an appeal, arguing that the trial took place in Kaukan, which was incorrect, as the crime happened in the jurisdiction of Los Machos. The higher court decided to reopen the trial, this time in the appropriate jurisdiction. Despite the expedited process, the verdict was not overturned. This decision made the public extremely angry. Hundreds of Mexicans and foreigners shared images on social media with signs demanding justice for Annel. Several polls were conducted in which more than 5 million users voted, considering Arandi's sentence to be unfair. Many wanted her to receive a much longer sentence. The trial was retried, and Arandi was sentenced again to 7 years in prison. Hugo spoke with journalists and expressed his discontent. Although the sentence was not reduced, he believed Arandi's age was no reason not to impose a longer sentence. He hoped that at least she would serve the prescribed number of years. However, this didn't happen. On July 6, 2016, Arandi's sentence was reduced to 5 years. It was also decided that with good behavior, she could be released even sooner. State police had to close the courthouse gates as many journalists attempted to photograph her. This case became one of the most prominent in the country. Hugo was not informed about this hearing, which deeply angered him, worsening the situation further. On Friday, September 23, 2017, a hearing was held to assess Arandi's behavior in light of changes to the federal juvenile justice law. She was released after serving 3.5 years of her original sentence. Hugo left the court very dissatisfied, feeling he had witnessed a great injustice. He expressed his disappointment because the legislative reforms seemed to favor offenders instead of the victims.